we're going to start it by welcoming our guests on the screen right now. Gentlemen, thank you for participating today.
Hello. Hello from Palm Springs, California.
Yes. How's California right now?
It's not as bad as I guess it looks on TV.
All right.
We hear that internationally it looks very bad on TV. But no, it's pretty nice for us. We've been all right.
All right. Well, good. Glad to hear that. I'll start the ball rolling. What made you choose Pierre Cardin as a subject for this documentary?
Well, it's interesting because actually we really feel like Pierre Cardin chose us. We collect a lot of Pierre Cardin. We're documentary filmmakers. It's what we do. But we have a lot of Pierre Cardin in our house. Wait, Todd, move that away. Look, there's a Pierre Cardin chair behind us, right? So we've been fans of his design, of his work, and we happened to find ourselves in Paris when we were making our last documentary, finishing it up, and we happened upon the museum, the Musée Cardin, and we didn't even really know that there was a person. I mean, we knew that Pierre Cardin is obviously a person, but we didn't know that he was still alive. We didn't know that he was active. We didn't know that he was working.
And so we just wanted to meet him because we couldn't believe you could meet Pierre Cardin. We never really thought of him as a real person. And then when we met him, it was very much like what happened with Jean-Paul Gaultier or Philippe Starck, without us really even asking. He knew we were documentary filmmakers, but we wouldn't even dream of asking such a thing. But he said yes. And we were like, it's fate, right? It was meant to happen.
Yeah, that's great. How long did a project like this take to put together from, inception to, when the final print is cut? What kind of time frame did you take?
We actually know, because our goal when we first met Pierre Cardin was to get a picture with him for Facebook, which we posted. And 2 years from that day, we were premiering the film at the Venice Film Festival. And it popped up on my Facebook page as like, your memory from 2 years ago this day. So it was literally 2 years from the day that we met him until we premiered the film.
But remember, when we met him, he was 95. And we did not know this guy yet. So we thought, we've got to act fast. We're given this incredible opportunity with this, guy who's lived through the 20th century. His life is the 20th century. And so we got our first interview and we were so relieved because we got it. And then, over the years' time, we got to really become friends with him and he got to trust us. And, the cameras just disappeared. We got to use French teams that were fantastic and he trusted everyone. Yeah. And so.
But it was like the UN because, we don't speak French, or we barely speak English, but we don't speak great French. And so we had people speaking in our ears and telling us what was being said as we were asking questions so that we could do follow-up questions. We had an interviewer, usually our producer, Corey Coppola, who's French-American. And so she would sit in front and sort of ask all the questions for us. But we always had a bug in our ear so that we knew what was going on and we could feed her follow-up questions. Usually I sit in the chair. I mean, it just happens to be the way that we do it, that I sit in the chair and I ask the questions of the subjects that we are talking to. And in this case, we had to be like, sort of one removed to be able to do it. But it was an amazing fun process.
It was very glamorous.
Well, speaking of glamour, the interviewees that were speaking about Pierre Cardin here, they're just a who's who of people in pop culture and fashion and movies. And was there anyone that you found was that their personality wasn't what you expected going into? Someone that maybe was more fun and cheerful, or someone that was maybe a little more reserved?
Well, the person who has the the sort of worst reputation publicly is Naomi Campbell. And she was a doll. She was a dream. She showed up. We had a 2 o'clock interview. 2:00 p.m. we hear click, click, click of her coming down a cobblestone street headed towards the Museum Cardin. She came in, she was prepared, she was interested, she wanted to be there. She was so nice to us, sweet.
And it was Paris when it sizzles. It was July 3rd and it was so hot and there was no air conditioning in the museum. She didn't complain once.
Yeah, she's a pro. She was a pro and just a lovely person.
Like Jean-Paul Gaultier is just magic. So he was the first person we knew we had to get. We didn't know when we met Pierre Cardin that he had discovered Gaultier or Philippe Starck. So they were the first two people we wanted to go after. Naomi was the only celebrity we know that wears vintage Cardin on the runway. So we asked
on the
red carpet.
Yeah,
sorry, but so she was actually the first person we asked, and she said yes. We were like,
and that set us off. Yeah, that set us off. But I mean, it's interesting because pretty much anybody, when you're calling up and you are the authorized Pierre Cardin documentary, I mean, we had him saying he wanted us to make his life story. They say yes when you ask because it's Pierre.
Well, we had some superstars. Brigitte Bardot said yes, and Alain Delon, who is one of Pierre's very good friends, and Gerard Depardieu said no twice, even though Pierre discovered him. Yeah. And he's now appearing at his music festival this summer singing.
In Lacoste. Yeah.
But it was just really difficult with those people, you know, because we've got the French disadvantage that we don't speak French and we're going through other people. So those never got
They were harder. They were just harder to set up.
And other ones just happened like magic, like Jean-Michel Jarre. We were at the Cardin archives and we kept finding pictures of Charlotte Rampling. And we're like, wow, were they friends? Well, actually, she was married to Jean-Michel Jarre. And Pierre sponsored a lot of his early career. And we knew that he always played the Jarre music at his fashion shows. So went on Facebook, wrote to his fan page. He was in Paris one day. The next day,
and we were
there leaving that afternoon. We threw it together. He lives in Marlene Dietrich's apartment, right? More of this stuff coming together. Yeah. And, you know, got a great interview from him.
But the most glamorous day of our lives was the day that we interviewed Sharon Stone in Los Angeles. It was the only day she could be interviewed. And we actually had to then leave the interview, go straight to the airport, fly to China. And we got off of the plane, got picked up by a bus, had to change our clothes to go to that amazing fashion show that was on the Great Wall of China that we had pre-set up. So all the cameras were there, ready to shoot for us. And Todd and David, two boys who just happened to love Pierre Cardin, had 2 seats in the front of the fashion show. We sit down and it begins and the cameras are, you know, wildly shooting this event. So we're like, who are we and what are we doing here?
That sounds wild. Anybody would like to come down? You have a question? Please feel free, come on down. We'd like to have you right here. I believe this microphone is working, so
thank you.
Here.
Let's just test.
Hello, thank you so much.
You can back up a little bit, I think, because it's going to be a little loud.
Great. I didn't know anything about Pierre Cardin either, but luckily there was a very good trailer on Facebook. So what I wondered is, was it also a gradual revelation about all these dimensions of him, which, what a beautiful soul and so inspirational, to slowly find about the egalitarianism and all the other sort of really beautiful extra things that he brought into the world, or is still bringing all this. Yeah, did you slowly sort of find these out through different interviews and so on? That's my question.
When we started and being just fans of kind of his design, not necessarily even really his fashion, but his design aesthetic, we didn't even really know what the man looked like, much less like what his accomplishments were. So when we met him and he was looking through all the things that we have in our house. He was looking through, you know, our furniture, the different things that we have. Like I had some pictures on my phone, and he stopped at the car at the 1972 Javelin, and looked at the phone, looked at me, looked at Todd, and said, "Okay, what do you want to do and when do you want to start?" And we were like, "Oh my God, we're going to make a documentary about Pierre Cardin, I guess." And then we Googled. Then we started looking him up and finding out who he was.
And like, we didn't even know about Beauty and the Beast. We didn't know about Dior. We didn't know about diversifying the runway, because we come into the story much later where we started appreciating him. And then it just kept going into China. And China, we didn't understand until we got there, really. And the people in Pierre Cardin, China, were telling us we had so much footage from that alone.
Yeah.
That could be its own movie. Because he was, and then we're like, God, this guy should win the Nobel Peace Prize for all he's done, bringing cultures together, and that he's done for the world economy and for the arts.
We've said often that, living in this kind of crazy world where people are digging underneath who celebrities are. And, you look at something like Harvey Weinstein, and you look into his life and you find out what a horrible, miserable human being he is. And so then you start looking into somebody like Pierre Cardin, and every layer you pull back, you find out, oh, and he's wonderful because of this, and he's fantastic because of this, and then he did this. And it's like we just were, we fell deeper in love.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's a lovely man. Like, loving what he's done in the world is one thing, but also really meeting this guy and knowing what a sweet, wonderful guy.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Are we big on the screen?
Very.
First of all, I really enjoy the editing. I really love it. It's just very modern, just exactly the same as the brand itself. And just out of curiosity, have you ever thinking of making it like a TV series instead of a film?
We have thought about that, and we pitched a little bit. The thing that we always try to hinge that idea on is the love triangle between Cardin, Jean Moreau, and Andre Oliver, and then telling sort of the story of what was going on around it with the fashion and the world around him through that idea, because truthfully, he stayed best friends with both of those people his entire life. So until Andre died in 1992 and until Jean Moreau died in 2017,
The year
Cardin actually paid for her funeral. So we thought, like, the idea of these lifelong loves, and then also, of course, showing all of the creativity that went around it, we thought would make for a great kind of,
and also
Mad Men in fashion.
Right, the Mad Men of fashion, going from the 50s through the 60s into the 70s, and just the revolutions that were going on all over the world.
Yeah. So yeah, we've thought about that. We've pitched it a little bit. We're pretty much in love with making documentaries right now. So it's a lot of work to try to get somebody to want to buy a TV series. It's a different kind of world. Right now, what we can do when we're making our docs is that if we get someone to say yes to doing an interview, then the next thing we know, we're making our movie. We go and we interview Sharon Stone, or we interview somebody, and it's 2 hours from their day. It's not, you don't have to have $7 million raised all at once, or whatever it is to make a movie. So we've been able to dive into this world of making documentaries since 2011 was our first one, and we've been really happy making them because it's a constant creative process. You're just always making, creating, putting things together.
Thank you. I think another question. Can I have a photograph of you?
How do we do it?
Just
Yeah.
I don't know. Just use the Zoom.
How do we take it?
She's got a friend in the audience who's taking the
Yeah.
photo. So everyone
So-
pose, say hi, smile.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Come on. We're all family. Yeah, well, we'll okay, we've got somebody coming down. In the meantime, you mentioned how you started. What was your first documentary that you worked on together?
We used to live in a neighborhood in LA called Silver Lake, and we had a neighbor. She lived a few streets over, but she had been the drummer of the band Hole.
Courtney Love's band.
Courtney Love's band. So at some point in our friendship, she said she knew we did a lot of audio-visual work. She had all these high-A tapes she had taken on tour with Hole, and she said, can you help me transfer them to digital? So David and she sat down one summer and started transferring them, the tapes, and she was telling the stories. And I would come home from work and they're watching these home movies of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love and their newborn baby. And I'm like,
what are you guys looking at? Yeah. And I was in between, I had just finished a huge TV series and I was home for the summer. And so I had the time to be able to do all of this with Patty. And so I told her, because she said, what do I do with these tapes? Should I just sell them to Sotheby's or, try to get money out of them? And I said, I think you really have a documentary. And she came back and asked us if we would do it and said, like, I just need somebody that I trust with my personal story. Patty Schemmel is her name. She's the drummer of Hole. And she went through this incredible journey where first she was just a girl who lived in Washington who happened to be, learning how to play drums. And she had this really good friend named Kurt Cobain, who turned out to be this, mega superstar, rock star. And so he asked her to audition for the band. And then his new wife, Courtney Love, said, no, I want her for my band. And before she knew it, she was on a worldwide tour with Hole playing stadium rock. And she was struggling with addiction. So she ended up homeless on the streets of Los Angeles after all of that and had to pull her life back together. So we told her, like, you have a full story. And that's what we ended up making as our first.
And it did come out in Australia.
Yeah, it's called Hit So Hard.
It is very good too. I have seen it.
Oh, thank you. We're always happy. We're always like, oh my God, somebody saw our movie, like, across the world.
We were so hoping we'd finally get to come to Australia for this.
Yeah.
Well, we're still here.
I know, we'll get there eventually.
We have our
So
next
let's
question.
California right now.
Right.
We're stuck.
Technically, on a personal note, I should be in California right now. I actually had planned a holiday, so it's nice to, we're commiserating. But you'll be here soon. Our next question.
Hi. I was just wondering, in the documentary, you mentioned that he didn't really want to have a biography written. So why was he so keen to jump on the opportunity to have this documentary about him?
Well, it's funny because, as I said, we did not ask. We thought this guy was way out of our league, right? And
I don't know. We made a documentary about Cher.
but still,
So we're like,
we didn't
we're
know.
in the game.
We didn't know how down to earth he was. But it was just that meeting with him and
Yeah, and he's we often say we think he's kind of clairvoyant, and that he met us and felt like it was safe, the right people to tell his story. We're a married couple. We think that in a way he was kind of ready to have his story be told completely. And when we said to him, he said, what would you want to make a film about? And we said, oh, not just about fashion, about everything. That's what we're interested in. And I think that was important to him, that it wasn't going to be just, yet another 30-minute French television special on Pierre Cardin makes these, space age fashions.
And his nephew too. We met his nephew before we met Pierre, and he said this would be a great year to do this kind of thing on my uncle, because he's going to have a show at Sotheby's, and there's this book coming out, and this fashion show on the Great Wall of China.
And Lacoste was
which
happening.
Didn't quite all register at the moment. We were just thought, oh yeah, it is a good time, right? Because we could actually follow him for a year, not thinking even at that time that was possible.
And the other thing that I think is really key is that the guy who's in the movie that you see, who is sort of American French, who seems like his best friend or like his assistant, he's with him a lot. His name is Matthew Gonder, and he's the American brand ambassador. And he is very close friends with Pierre. And he said to him, when we were asking about doing the documentary and getting serious about making it, he said, isn't it better to have these two people who really seem to love you do this documentary and tell your life story while you're here and while you can tell your own story, instead of this happening posthumously and people coming along and doing something that isn't what you want? And so Matthew was really key in telling him, this is your opportunity. You can be here with us and tell your own story. And so I think it was just kismet, as we say. It was the right time, right moment.
But he did participate with a writer 10 years ago, I think, on a biography, and he read it and he said, stop this. I want no part of this. And so the book was published. He bought up all the copies to try to stop it. So when we sent him the first cut to watch, he was watching it at Maxime's one afternoon in Paris while we were in Palm Springs in this pool, just like, I hope he likes it. And thank God he watched it and he laughed and he cried and he loved it.
And we got the word back from Rodrigo, who said, Rodrigo is English as a fourth language or something like that. And he said, my uncle loves, and he says everything is true. And we were like,
and he appreciated that it was 97 minutes long because he was 97 at the time.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I thought it was great.
Oh,
thank you so much. Thank you. We're so happy people are watching the movie in a movie theater. I can't even tell you.
Yeah, but before we're done, I'll turn the camera around so you can see all these lovely people as well. We have another question here.
Oh, thank you very much for the wonderful insight to this fantastic man. I couldn't help reflect that his disposition was formed as a tailor, as a fabricator, a cutter of objects, of putting things together, of assembling. And it struck me that he continued to do this, but some of the things that he assembled were industry and philosophies and cultures, but he still comes across so full and rich in fidelity as a cutter and a tailor and an assembler, and an extraordinary, whether he was using scissors to cut a piece of fabric to fabricate a wonderful garment, or whether he was writing contracts to employ tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
This spirit of fabrication seemed to be alive in him. And his instruments and his fabrics were people and the opportunities of people. I guess you could say he was a very gifted project manager, but that's a crude term to use him. Right. He's a tailor, he's a cutter and a fabricator and a maker of bringing into being a manifestation from elements. And a tailor, a sewer, an artist that works with fabric is an absolute quintessential exemplar of that sort of managerial vision. I don't know whether did you think of those dimensions? Your process was very, take one bit, leapfrog to the next bit that you learned. But at the same time, the man is a coherent entity himself who was a tailor and a cutter right from the beginning.
We also, I think the process of making the film to some extent was a lot of discovery, and the archival material showed us how consistent he's been over time. So that we were going back to things that were filmed 50 years ago and being able to cut him together, saying things about himself, his life, his philosophies, his ideas. And it is true that you say, wow, he has a continuum. And so from being a young boy who learned how to be a tailor to being somebody who put things together for the rest of his life is really like consistent in who he is. And we also really feel like there's the one quote in the movie that we say to him off camera, what's your secret to eternal life? And he says, work, 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 and stay happy. But work, work, work for him is make, make, make. It is to be there and do it himself. He still is not the kind of person who says, that's fine. I have an empire. I'll stay at home and make some money. He signs every check. He works with those people. He wants to be the one who sees every design. When we send things about what we're doing, they have to be shown to Mr. Cardin.
And we tried to showcase in that film, his actual hands are enormous.
He has beautiful.
And just so graceful. And, you know, it's true that everything comes from those fingers.
Yeah.
And as Renee says, he has, what is it in French, or dans la main, golden hands, right? There is something so tactile about him, so down to earth, even though his philosophies are so pure and universal. It all just boils down to this.
And Kenzo talks about it too, that he went to see him in Japan and that he was making things right on the models, magic, just sort of right there, just snip, snip, and making things right in front of their eyes. And that it was so inspiring to Kenzo. So I think it's very true about him. He's, we've talked about this a lot ourselves, that there's so many personalities in the world of fashion. So you have these sort of larger than life personalities like Karl Lagerfeld, or even Calvin Klein, who's so well known for Studio 54 and all of that. But Cardin was back behind the scenes making, you know, being a designer. He was not as interested in being that figure that was a public figure in that kind of way.
And always in his heart, he was a tailor. He was a worker. I love in that early interview, and they're like, you started at the House of Dior as what? He says, a worker. Right? Like, what do you think I started as?
Right.
But that has given him this humble core that allows him to deal with kings and, you know, the people that work for him and everybody he treats equally. Yeah. So, you know, the democracy starts at the top. So
yeah, he's quite an incredible person.
Very inspiring, really.
Thank you very much. A great insight.
Great question. Great question.
Anyone else curious about the process, about the film, or have a question about these gentlemen's work, or anyone not shy? A lot of shy folks. Well, we get someone up that, you know, they'll get their nerve up to ask the next question. But I have one. Speaking of what's next, what do you have next in anything in production, anything you're working on, anything that we can expect for you to show in Australia once you're allowed to come in?
COVID has been so funny because, you know, you're locked in at home. And so being makers ourselves, being the kind of people who use our own hands, we had shot a bunch of footage for a documentary right before COVID happened. And so we had in the can pretty much a documentary ready to go. And I come from post-production, from editing, and we have all the ability to edit here. We like to be directors and sit back and let other people edit. But we just said, you know, this seems like the time that we just need to make this movie. So we just finished a rough cut of a new film on a man named Trini Lopez. And he is the first Latino rock star. He was actually pretty well known in Australia. He had pretty big hits, If I Had a Hammer, La Bamba, and Lemon Tree, America, and he
really created folk rock. Peter, Paul, and Mary had a big hit with If I Had a Hammer. Trini came out with it after them, and his went worldwide because he was putting a Latin rhythm to folk music. And people say it's Latin rock or folk rock, but
yeah, he's now 82 years old, speaks English. So we were like, oh my God, this is so easy compared to 95 and speaks French. And he lives here in Palm Springs, and we got to know him through friends and other producers. And so we did a bunch of interviews with him. We staged a concert with him. And so it's a bit of a concert film and a revisiting of what he did back in the day. His parents were illegal immigrants who came from Mexico illegally across the border, and then had all their children in Dallas, Texas. And so it's kind of a great current story for the US as well, where we're dealing with so many of those issues. And he went on to become this American icon, member of the Rat Pack. Frank Sinatra discovered him, and we always say he fought his way out of the ghetto with a guitar. So he's quite a great American figure that is a little forgotten, a little unknown, but needs to be rediscovered.
But you know, the United States of amnesia, it's like we're still dealing with these issues, but that he broke such ground when he did. He was the first, right before him was a guy named Richie Valens, who was named Richard Valenzuela. But of course they anglicized his name, and Trini was the first artist to say, they said, you have to change your name. And he said, Trini, right? Weird name. And they said, no, Lopez has got to go. And he said, I won't do that. And we have Tony Orlando in the film saying he was the man who said Latin names can be on a Las Vegas marquee.
Can headline, yeah. So we call the film My Name is Lopez.
That's great. That's great. Look forward to that as soon as it's available. Yeah.
Well, as soon as we're allowed to like go to film festivals again. We're trying to finish the movie up, and we're talking about next year in film festivals, and we're like, what will happen? We don't know. We really don't.
Well, we know what happened today. We all had a good time, right? Yeah. All right. Do we have any more questions? Would you like to ask a question? Please come on down.
Hi, guys. Thanks. That was great. It was inspiring to see that guy and to know that he started out cutting fabric himself. That was cool. Just one quick one. I'm just wondering, this is a technical question. Nowadays, when you make a documentary like that, what sort of, I don't think people film in with celluloid anymore, right? Is that all done in on video or what? How,
yeah, we're shooting in HD. We're shooting in.
It's called 4K.
Yeah.
It's like this huge digital format, which allows you really to go, when we're working with the film, it looks terrible. Not terrible, but you know, when you get to the final moment,
it's called raw. Yeah.
Right? All those scenes in Maxime's with those rich reds and those golds, and they just come out and they're these little tiny cameras. It's really amazing, but it allows us to, we worked with 5 editors all over the place because we needed editors that spoke different languages.
Wow.
And, you know, just to be able to shoot on video, to people access it, and also remember that we had all this footage in Chinese and Japanese that we had no idea what was going on. So once we had to get everything subtitled that was in a foreign language, Italian or French. And then, you know, so in the old days, I don't know how you would do that, because we could just put a file, write a text file on top of the video file and cut that. And with the Romance languages, it was pretty easy to keep it in line, but with the Chinese and Japanese, we had no idea if we were keeping the subtitles where they were supposed to go. And there was drift for sure.
Yeah.
That's why we needed Chinese and Japanese editors.
Yeah, assistant editors mostly, but yeah.
So the subtitles are put on first by the translators, and then you guys.
Yeah. We had assistant editors who were translators, and they would go through and subtitle. We would get transcripts done first, so there was English that was translated by just I don't know if it's a bot or a program, and someone who overseed it. So we would get the original language and the English language in a Word document. And then assistant editors would go through and put that onto the film for us so that we could edit, because until then it's funny because I can hear the French now. When I watch the film now, I can hear everything that everybody is saying, but we now know what they're saying. So it's a lot easier. We can marry it together from the subtitles and what's happening. But when we just got the footage back and we were trying to go through things, I mean, it was just all, you know, who knows what anybody is saying. So we had assistant editors who spoke French, Mandarin, Italian, Japanese. I feel like there's one more language I'm forgetting.
Russian?
No Russian.
No Russian in it.
We tried.
Yeah.
We tried to get Farsi. We asked Queen Farah, because the Shah of Iran's wife, who was a big Cardanophile, and she now lives in England. She wouldn't do it, but we almost got Farsi, and we tried to get some Russian. But
thanks, guys.
That was quite a process. It was fun. But it was a big process.
And it's very interesting to hear about that. I'd never even considered that the transcript needs to be there first for editing, and that makes complete sense. You need to have all that information when you're cutting together.
It's also complicated because when you're making a narrative film, if somebody is on screen and talking and you put subtitles underneath them, it pretty much stays with that image. But when you're making a documentary, you're always going to B-roll. So they start to talk and you cut away to fashions, or you cut away to, you know, the Great Wall of China, whatever you might be showing. And so the subtitles have to be something that you can keep in a format that overrides and keeps going with your B-roll and all of the other things that you're doing. So we actually had a pretty complicated edit and editing system where we had subtitles that were on a level or riding above everything else. And when you edited, like Todd was saying, when you're suddenly doing Chinese and you have to say, well, I think we want to shorten this. You have to make sure you're not chopping off some word you don't even understand.
Right.
Most languages, you could at least sort of say that's the end of the sentence.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I don't ever do this sort of thing. I'm really scared.
We've lured him up.
You know, right at the end, I think you said, or Pierre Cardin said, not to impose, but to, what was that saying that he said?
He said, I'm not here to impose, I'm here to propose.
Propose. Okay, that was just bugging me. I just had to get that out.
Yeah.
But we love that. That's so beautiful, right? I'm not here to force my ideas down your throat. I'm just saying, what if?
Right.
Why
To
not?
propose ideas and then let them simmer.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sure.
No worries. And that's an excellent way to end on that. So we'd like to thank you all for coming here today. We'd like to thank our guests from their lovely home in sunny California. We hope to see you soon in person. And we hope to see you all again here at Palace Nova Cinemas.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming to the movies.
Oh, yes, we need to turn the camera around.
Oh, yeah.
Wave, everyone wave.
Oh, wow, yeah. Oh, that's so awesome.
Get the house lights up, Scott.
That's so great.
I think I can see him flipping switches. You
We're
turn
posting you all on Facebook.
Is it cold there?
He's working on it.
Is it cold there?
That's as much as it can.
Yeah. Scott, can we get the lights?
That unfortunately is
There you
as
go.
bright as they can go.
That's a high order. You know, it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know if you're Celsius or Fahrenheit, but it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit here every day right now.
Is that grown jealousy or? Yeah. All right.
Seasons.
Aren't we opposite?
Yes.
We're winter when we're summer.
Yeah.
Yes, it is winter here. Hence the long sleeves and everyone dress.
I know how, hence
There
our
we go.
t-shirts, right? We're like.
All right. Well, again, thank you. Thank you all for attending. And we hope to see you all very soon.
Thank you. Thank you.